Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here. I am back again today doing another video, and the subject of today's video is going to be on the Milwaukee Bucks. I'm basically going to be doing a retrospective on their season and why they found success, and then ultimately why they didn't find success later on towards the end of the season, losing to the Toronto Raptors in the Eastern Conference Finals. Last night they lost the final game. It was game 6, so they pushed the Raptors to 6 games, but ultimately lost. It was kind of disappointing that they were up 2-0, but then lost 4 straight to Toronto. But that's in the history books now, and we gotta go with what we know. And so I just want to look back and look at maybe why they found success initially this season, and then why they basically failed to find success in the playoffs. So let's get into it. If you don't know, the Milwaukee Bucks had the best record in the NBA this season with 60 wins and 22 losses. And this is a pretty big jump from last year when they were in the middle of the pack, a 40-something win team. They were, I believe, let's see here, I think the 7th seed in the playoffs. I think they had around 46 wins, so they did make quite a jump this year. And Giannis had a great year. He will likely win MVP, I would suspect. This year he had averages of 28 points per game, 13 rebounds, 6 assists, 1 steal, 1 block a game, about 4 turnovers a game. He shot 58% from the field. He shot 26% from 3, and he got about 10 free throws a game, shooting 73% on those. They also featured a supporting cast with Chris Middleton, who averaged 18 points per game and 6 rebounds, and he shot 44% from the field and 38% from 3, which is pretty good. Then they also had Eric Bledsoe being a big contributor, giving them 16 points per game, shooting 48% from the field, which is good for a point guard. And then rounding out sort of the main group here, we had Brook Lopez with 13 points per game, 5 rebounds a night, shooting 37% from 3. Malcolm Brogdon getting 16 points per night on amazing shooting numbers of 51% from the field, 43% from 3, and he shot 93% from the free throw line. And then Nikola Mirotic, who was a mid-season acquisition, rounds out this team, the main supporting cast. He had 12 points per game, shooting 42% from the field and 36% from 3 on his time with the Bucks. So essentially, let's get into why they were successful. They copied a blueprint that other teams have done well in the past, and I think is most successfully done by the Orlando Magic from about 2007 to 2012, and the Miami Heat when they had LeBron and Wade and Bosh. So what do I mean by this? The offensive style is what you would call a 4-out, 1-in style, and what that means is you got 4 guys on the outside of the court, as in they play on the perimeter. They're basically spot up jump shooters. They're really good at spacing the floor and making 3-pointers and creating a lot of space for one player or maybe 2, depending on the team, to penetrate to the center of the lane and have their way in the middle. So for that Orlando Magic team, their best season was 2009 or 2008 to 9 when they got to the finals. They won 59 games, one less than the Bucks 60, with a pretty similar style. They were anchored by Dwight Howard, who was a defensive presence and an offensive nightmare on the interior, much like Giannis was, a big defensive presence, but also a big offensive interior presence. And so basically they surround that one guy, either Dwight or Giannis, with 4 really good shooters at any given time. So the guys for Milwaukee who have been good shooters were Middleton at 38% from 3. Bledsoe isn't great. He's only 33%, but that's because he does some dribble penetration, which I'll get into. But besides him, you've got Brook Lopez at 37%, Brogdon at 43%, and Mirotic at 36%. So all pretty good shooters. And then also, if you want to include Ilyasova at 36% and Tony Snell at 40%, additional good guys off the bench who are really good at shooting the ball and just can continue this whole idea of 4 guys out, 1 in. And if you want to look at the Magic quick, their whole scheme would be Dwight Howard's the guy on the inside, and then their primary 4 dudes on the court would be Jameer Nelson, JJ Redick, Rashard Lewis, and then Hedo Turkoglu, who, if you don't know, all 4 of those guys are really good shooters. And then off the bench, you'd have like Mikal Petrus and Courtney Lee, who are also good shooters, and Rafer Alston, who is sometimes a good shooter, kind of like the Bledsoe of the Bucks team. So that's really the idea. And then you have So the main offensive component would be for the Magic, it was get the ball down to Dwight. He had this agility, athleticism, and physical dominance that could basically overpower almost any center in the league, and a lot of times would command a double team. In that case, the defense would have to bring another guy down onto Dwight, and then that would leave one of the four guys on the perimeter open. And so then Dwight's role would be to dish it out to one of them, and they would do an open jump shot. And based on the percentages and them being really good shooters, they would make it, and that's basically how the team found success consistently on offense. So basically, your constant choice is: do you want to um, guard the really dominant interior presence one-on-one, or take your risk of double teaming him and leaving a guy open? And as I did mention the Miami Heat earlier, when they had LeBron, it was sort of like the Bucks with Bledsoe, and D Wade was essentially the better version of Bledsoe on the Heat, in that he wasn't a great shooter, but he was kind of a secondary option of penetration in case they needed it. But you had LeBron, who was the guy who was going to be essentially what Giannis is, and the Bucks' current offense was. He was either going to post up or drive, and you either had to risk double teaming him, or if you left him unguarded, he would likely be able to uh, overcome whatever defender was on him and score just because of his physical dominance. And so for the Heat, your likely lineup was like Mario Chalmers, Dwayne Wade, Ray Allen, Shane Battier, Chris Bosh, LeBron James, any combination of those six guys basically. But you have LeBron, Wade, and then those other four are shooters between Chalmers, Allen, Battier, and Bosh. So you had a lot of floor spacing on that team as well, and that's how they got it done. But now, so for those teams, for Orlando, they eventually ran into a roadblock in that the Lakers were a really big physical team when they played them in the finals between Bynum and Gasol, and so Bynum had enough strength and agility and athleticism to somewhat combat Dwight Howard, and the Magic also ran into really cold shooting in the finals, which is something that all these jump shooting teams really risk, is that, a lot of times playing the odds in that 3 points is better than two, it can be a really good thing to be a jump shooting team, but on the off chance that your team just goes cold from shooting these long shots, like the Rockets did in the 2018 Western Conference Finals when they missed the 27 straight threes, or like the Magic did in the finals in '09 when they missed a bunch of shots. It's sort of a boom or bust style of offense, and that you're either going to be really successful or you're going to be dead in the water. And so if you look at like even the Miami Heat in 2014 when they brought in Rashard Lewis to be a starter in the finals, he had been coming off the bench for the last 2 years, but they brought him in to be a starter, and he played okay, but you see a lot of their other shooters just shot a lot more poorly than usual. That it's just a boomer bust system where they would have won more games against the Spurs in 2014, but because they didn't have their shooters on par, then they lost the series. Same with the Magic in '09. If the likes of Rashard Lewis would have been better at shooting, along with Redick and Courtney Lee and Mikal Pietrus, they would have been better off, but they missed some shots, and so that's just the way it goes. You're essentially chalking it up to chance a lot more by being a jump shooting team, but as I say, if it goes well, you're going to win a lot of games, and if you get cold, you're going to lose and be dead in the water. So let's get back to this more on the Bucks team here. So if you look at their team, as I say, they shot a lot of three-pointers. Brook Lopez was a huge part of that, and that he was a good three-point shooter this year, getting up to 37%. He got the nickname Splash Mountain. If you look at some of the totals for this team, you had Middleton taking 6 3-pointers a game. Lopez took 6 a game. Mirotic took 6 a game. Bledsoe took 5 a game. Brogdon took 4 a game. Connaughton took 3, George Hill took 3, Tony Snell took 3 a game, Giannis took 3 a game. So they had quite a few guys who were willing to shoot three-pointers. And the thing about that is that it changed in the Eastern Conference Finals because they were no longer playing a variant of defenses who were either good or bad. They were playing the number 5 defense in the NBA this year, who got the chance to over and over again play the Bucks and learn their style. And what you'll notice is in games 1 and 2, Giannis is being guarded by a bunch of different people, and mostly Pascal Siakam though. And then for games 3, 4, 5, and 6, they put almost exclusively Kawhi on Giannis, and Giannis played a lot worse because of that. So I'll compare his stats first because they're the most significant, and that basically trickles down to why the rest of the team did or didn't find success against the Raptors. So, okay, regular season 28 points per game. In the Eastern Conference Finals for Giannis, 23 points per game. Rebounds were the same at 13, assists were the same at 6, but then the shooting percentages is where it's really interesting. So 3-point percentage for Giannis, 26% during the regular season, actually bumped up to 33% in the Eastern Conference Finals. That's the anomaly here. Free throws, he shot 73% during the regular season. He shot 58% in the Eastern Conference Finals. And then the most telling one is field goal percentage, which in the regular season was at 58%, and during the playoffs was at 45%, which is significantly lower. And so the main reason for this is, as I broke down earlier, the main reason that this offense was successful is that you have the option either double team Giannis and risk an open shooter, or risk a guy guarding him one on one and them being dominated and Giannis scoring pretty easily. And so the thing here that basically this Bucks team doesn't really account for is that there might be defenders out there who are capable of guarding Giannis one on one and possibly their defense being better than his offense. And that was exactly the case with this Toronto Raptors series, in that Kawhi Leonard, with all due respect to Giannis, Kawhi Leonard is a better defender than Giannis is an offensive player. Giannis's game is limited in certain ways. He's not a jump shooter. He honestly shouldn't be shooting shots outside of around 10 feet, in my opinion. And so if you even just look at his comparisons for shooting numbers from the regular season to postseason, so in the regular season, Giannis took 84% of his shots were 2-pointers, and then in the playoffs that was down to 79. But then if you look at the combined numbers, you get that 72% of Giannis's shots came within 10 feet of the basket during the regular season. 72% of his shots were within 10 feet during the regular season. I just want to repeat that. In the playoffs, that lowered quite a bit. It was, instead of 73%, it was down to, let's see here, it was down to 68, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it is actually significant in that he was taking more 3-pointers. And it just, his 3-pointers went up from, so in the regular season, 16% of the shots he was taking were 3-pointers. That went up to 21% in the postseason. And his shots closer to the interior went down because even if you look in the Raptors series, you got Serge Ibaka, who can protect the rim at times. Marc Gasol isn't a rim protector, but he is a really good post interior defender. So just his presence down there probably was somewhat of a deterrence for Giannis, and he thought to shoot a little bit farther out. Pascal Siakam's a high flyer. He can sometimes be a minor rim protector. But then the main difference here is Kawhi. So one of Giannis's favorite moves is to kind of back down a defender, back him down, and then do a fadeaway little jumper at around 6 to 7 feet. And the thing is, he is like 7 feet tall, 6'11", so usually his arms are long enough to extend over that defender and get the basket in with no problems, get the ball up for the shot, get a good look, not really have too much of an arm in his face. But Kawhi is a physical freak in that he has these extremely long arms, extremely big hands, and although he's not as tall as Giannis, his arms are long enough that they still compensate for that lack of height compared to Giannis, and they still get right in his face. His hands are much bigger than a regular defender, so the area that they're blocking is actually much bigger than anyone else in the league that's probably guarding Giannis at a given time. So Giannis is getting a much less clear look at the basket. Besides this, just as far as the drives that Giannis would do, Kawhi is like glue. He's like a glove. He does not come off of you. He can match Giannis step for step as far as like driving to the basket and such. And so you'll notice that once they put Kawhi on Giannis in this series, his shots became a lot more difficult, and he didn't have nearly as easy of a time getting to his spots on the court and driving to the hoop and getting interior looks and even getting those little fadeaways. So he had to work a lot more. And so because their offense is a trickle-down effect in which it starts with Giannis, and then that leads to the shooters getting their looks and spots and opportunities. When Giannis isn't getting those open looks as easily and he's only being guarded one-on-one and they're not commanding a double team, And I mean, sometimes they were. I will admit, sometimes they were, and sometimes the result of the Bucks doing poorly was just bad, spotty shooting, like I mentioned, with the Rockets in previous years and the Magic in previous years. Sometimes jump shooting teams honestly just go cold, and that's the result, and that's the reason that they fail. But at the same time, a lot of times with Kawhi on them, the need for a double team wasn't as urgent, so they would just have Kawhi single cover Giannis, and then all the shooters on the court would be covered, and there wouldn't be those easy open opportunities like they had in the regular season a lot more frequently. So the jump shooting was a lot harder, and then they were kind of, even when they did double team Giannis and the shooters were open, they were a little bit more out of rhythm just because they were being guarded tougher and more frequently than they were in the regular season. So I think basically it's all of those factors is why the Bucks just were not able to overcome the Raptors. And so to break it down, the Bucks depend on jump shooting, and because of jump shooting, sometimes you're going to go cold as a team. That's the reason number one, and they did at sometimes just go cold. Number two, Giannis was being single covered by Kawhi a lot of the time, and he's a better defender than Giannis is an offensive player, so it took away a lot of the open opportunities that their jump shooters get. And then number three, Giannis's easy looks became much more difficult because of Kawhi's defensive acumen. So for those three reasons, the inconsistency of being a jump shooting team, the lack of easy opportunities for Giannis, and then the jump shooters being defended much more frequently because of the lack of a need for a double team. Those reasons all combined are why the Milwaukee Bucks, although becoming really successful in the regular season and the early rounds of the playoffs, when you get to those tougher defensive teams in the later rounds, they're going to struggle a lot more, especially when you have a guy who is a singular lockdown defender, two-time defensive player of the year in Kawhi. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope that clarified maybe why Milwaukee looked so good early on and then kind of broke down towards the end. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave comments below if you have any, and I'll see you next time. Bye.